Hello, welcome to Civic Conversations. I am your host, Marvin King. On today's episode, I am pleased to welcome Jordan Cohen, Assistant Director of Equal Opportunity and Regulatory Compliance and Ole Miss's Title IX Coordinator. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jordan, many of our listeners understand how Title IX applies to collegiate athletics. We've had a discussion on this earlier. But what about the rest of university life? What is the role of Title IX in higher education?
So, if I were to say it from 10,000 feet, the role of Title IX in higher education is to make sure there is equality based on sex in any university program or activity. Now, if we get down a little closer to the ground, we can talk about what that actually factually looks like on a day-to-day basis. But that's really why we're here, why we're serving, what we're doing and serving the greater external to athletics university population.
Give us an example real quick of, so from the 10,000 bird's eye view, if you come down a little bit to just say a large state university, uh, where might Title IX be involved in, say, programming or events, or maybe that means personnel that are hired? Give us a few examples.
Sure. So if I can give like a brief history lesson to kind of illustrate. So when in 1972, when Title IX first came to be, the focus really was that there were very few women in university settings or academia, right? That is no longer the case, which is wonderful. Most colleges are at least 50% women, and actually now a lot of colleges and institutions of higher learning, women represent more than half. Which is not the goal. Obviously, the goal is equity, but it reflects that that's not our number one concern anymore. Um, Around 2011, the Obama administration decided that they really wanted to nail down the issue of gender-based violence on college campuses, right? So these days, what Title IX mostly focuses on are things that kind of fall under that umbrella. And I will add that while it's referred to as gender-based violence, there is not one particular sex or gender that these types of things apply to, right? So these would be things like stalking, domestic violence, dating violence, and sexual assault and sexual harassment.
I know you can't get into specific cases, um, but could you provide an example or two of a stereotypical case that Title IX offices might frequently see?
Definitely. What I'll say first is there tends to be trends every year, and I'm sure a sociologist would be interested in why, in 2022, stalking was the number one thing we see in our office, and why in 2024 it was pregnancy-related accommodations. I'm sure there's like very interesting research to be done there. But I will say, um, I'll pick stalking, for example, because that tends to be one that is quite gender and sex neutral, meaning the complainant and the respondent could be both men, both women, or any combination of those things. Stalking concerns don't really discriminate. Um, and so I would say, yeah. So an example of stalking or something that we would see often in our office with stalking would be something that comes up a lot with young people, which is, we have this fifth thing on us. Sorry, I know this is audio recording. I'm pointing to my phone. It's much easier to get a hold of your friends than it ever was before, which can be a good thing. But it can also be an avenue for someone to harass you, who you don't want to have access to. And that can kind of look like things like if you have your snap maps on. I don't know, Dr. King, if you know what snap
I
maps
have no idea what that is, so please tell me.
Okay. Well, it's had to be explained to me as well. So I guess I'm officially getting old. But so, do you know what Snapchat is?
I do know what Snapchat is.
Okay, so there's this feature on Snapchat where you can turn your snap maps on, which basically means that anybody who follows you on Snapchat can see where you are at all times.
Why would you do this?
That is my response as well. There
Okay.
is a setting where you can limit it to your friends. That would be my suggestion if you feel so called to have it on 24/7. But it is, again, no one is responsible for being stalked, right? It's the stalker's behavior that is the inappropriate behavior, not
Of
the
course.
behavior of the victim. However, there are things that we can do to protect ourselves, and one of those things is to make sure that things like our location is as private as it can be, right? So stalking is just an example of something we see often in our office because I think in terms of interpersonal violence these days, it's one of the more accessible ways to harass
For
someone.
sure. That makes sense because as we know, stalking has probably always existed, but the technology has enabled, unfortunately, people's worst tendencies
Right.
and made it easier. And you've got many college students. For most of them, this is their first time living away from home. And so I can imagine they see technology as a way to connect with people, which it is until a relationship turns sour, a stalker. So, when a case comes to the Title IX office, what are your typical first steps? So, if someone listening to this was like, "Well, I'm afraid of going to the Title IX office because I don't know what's going to happen," how do you answer that question?
Sure. The first thing I would say is that for the most part, unless there's an imminent threat to campus safety, we do not make people go through the process of investigation in our office. So maybe you're having an experience that you're feeling uncomfortable with or you want to be addressed, but you're also thinking, I don't want to go through an investigation. I just want a simple solution to this. Insofar as there is a quick and simple solution, we're happy to help you figure that out. We're never going to make you, with that exception of campus safety, go through an investigation if you do not want to. So I would encourage people to come talk to us because oftentimes there are, quick solutions or first steps that can be taken to address some of these concerns that don't have to go all the way to an investigation. We're a complainant driven office, which just means that we like students to be in the driver's seat of their experience in our office in the vast majority of situations. So that's what I would say is don't be scared that if you come here, the train is off the tracks and now we're in control of your concerns. We really like, under most circumstances, for the student to get to decide how they want the solutions to look.
Ironically, we know that students are very concerned about privacy, even though we might also think that they overshare. I'm assuming that the HIPAA and FERPA and confidentiality requirements all apply to your office.
Yes, our office is completely confidential, meaning if your parents call and want to know what's going on, I cannot even acknowledge that I know you if you're over the age of 18 without you signing a waiver. If you want me to talk to your parents, happy to talk to your parents, but I'm not going to be volunteering any of that information. If a journalist reached out to me and was asking questions, I would not engage with them whatsoever. Again, wouldn't even acknowledge that I know what it is that they're talking about. So yes, our privacy laws are very strict, and there's a reason for that. We want you to be able to come and go without concerns about other people being aware of, intimate information about maybe, the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
I don't know if there's any data behind this, but I feel that for every student that brings an issue to your office, there might be two, three, dozens more that have a similar issue who don't come. Is there any way to know that, or is there data or information on like the scale of instances that might come to your office?
Yeah, so the CDC would say, I believe these numbers change from time to time. I believe it's 1 in 4 women will experience sexual assault in their life, and 1 in 5 men will experience sexual assault in their life. Our numbers in our office are certainly not reflective of 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 students coming to talk to us. So we would certainly imagine that there's a significant portion of the university population that does not want to come to our office. And again, no judgment here, it's your decision on how you want to manage these things. We just want people to feel safe coming to talk to us and to know that we're going to respect their confidentiality. And to your point, Dr. King, we were talking before we recorded about how my office just moved. And I will say one of the benefits of no longer being on the main campus, we're on South Oxford campus now, is that if there are concerns about people seeing you on the main campus coming and going from our office location is now very private and you're very unlikely to run into other students, faculty, or staff while you're here.
That's a great point. I've actually heard the same issue from faculty, students, and staff about the University Counseling Center,
Mhm.
that it is somewhat visible and people might be more apt to use their services if it was somewhere a little less visible, a little more private. That's the sort of thing where, design makes a difference. Today's guest is Jordan Cohen, Assistant Director of Equal Opportunity and Regulatory and Compliance and the University of Mississippi's Title IX coordinator. Does federal law require every institution of higher education to have a Title IX coordinator?
Every institution that has federal funding. So essentially, yes, every institution.
Oh,
Even private schools accept some type of federal funding, so it's very rare for there to be an institution that is not required to have a Title IX
well,
coordinator.
and I can imagine every university has so many FAFSA dollars, uh, financial aid. So that I'm sure that would include virtually every campus. So, what would you say is the long term effect of Title IX? How might we measure or comprehend the law's impact in its totality now that it's over 50 years old?
So I'll break this up into parts. I think what I was talking about earlier about the original purpose of the law in 1972 to make sure that women had access to universities and higher education, we can now kind of step back and see the effect of that, right? We can see that women are at least representing 50% of the vast majority of colleges and higher education institutions. When it comes to the impact of what we're focusing on now, more gender-based violence type things, I really don't know if we'll be able to see the scope of that in terms of how access changes for maybe 20 years. I think, again, sociologists might have more thoughts on this, but I think it'll be a little time before we can step back and see what the impact is, especially because now that we're not necessarily focusing on one particular sex or gender, these things affect, people across the spectrum. I think it's hard to quantify the way it used to be. It used to be that we could measure very clearly this many women are attending public universities versus how many attended 10 years ago. I think it'll take a little time for us to figure out what the data looks like on the impact of the focus of Title IX these days.
Given the fact that there are, I don't know the number offhand, but I'll just say tens of millions of students in higher ed at any given point in time, this is clearly something that affects a large number of people. And 35% of Americans have a college degree. So, 1 in 3 of us go through college at some point in our lives. And so, understanding how all this works on a college campus, I think is useful and important. So, um, I know you talk to student groups. What advice would you think is most important for incoming freshmen to know about the Title IX process?
I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, which is that we are not going to force you to go through an investigation in our office. It is safe to come to our office, share your concerns, strategize with us about, the options available to you, and make the decision that's right for you. Again, I'm going to add the little disclaimer, unless there's some kind of imminent threat to campus safety. I think that a lot of times is the biggest barrier to entry is if you've experienced something that falls within our office, you've already experienced a loss of control and understandably, people have a concern about losing more of that control, coming to the Title IX office, worried that we're going to, you know, take the driver's seat of their concern moving forward. And so we really want them to know that we respect your autonomy in this office and the decision is yours and how you want to manage the situation. So please don't let that be the reason that you don't come talk to us.
I can imagine some people feel, okay, well, maybe I've called UPD
Mhm.
or OPD. Are law enforcement officers trained to refer students to Title IX, or what might that process be like?
Yes. So on our campus, they're mandatory reporters. So if they are aware of an incident that falls under our umbrella, they're required to report it to our office, and we will make contact with those students. Now, interestingly, we are not mandatory reporters. So to the police. And there's a big complex conversation about the reasons for that. But all that to say, again, if another deterrent is that you're worried that you don't want to get the police involved, we are not obligated to get the police involved unless you specifically would like us to. Again, unless there's a public safety.
Jordan, thank you so much for your time. If any of our listeners want to learn more about the history of Title IX or its impact, do you have an article or a book to recommend?
I'll send you a link. I was just reading something today that some Harvard journalism students wrote where they spoke to some Title IX coordinators who have worked for Harvard and who have worked for other institutions just about the impact they've seen over their careers. I thought it was really interesting. So,
Well, that'll be perfect. If they do need your office, then they know more about what to expect going into it. So, Jordan, Cohen, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Dr. King.